Mark, as you know, we have received this alleged ransom letter involving Nancy Guthrie, and it is increasingly feeling to me like this is the real deal.
What are the earmarks of this thing that let you go to the point where you put out there that you thought it was real? Because that, to me, is really, that almost validates the fact that there's something to it.
Yeah, well, there are a number of things. One is the two items mentioned in this letter that presumably nobody would know unless they were part of that scene. One is the Apple Watch. Now, it's not a big thing that anybody knew that Nancy had an Apple Watch, a white Apple Watch, because she's been photographed with that with Savannah. But what's interesting in the letter is where it's placed in the house. And they mentioned that specifically. I found that interesting. The second thing is a destroyed floodlight. I know the FBI, I think they said damaged. The way it's written in the letter is destroyed. And that felt almost aggressive on the part of the writer. And, as if maybe that person did it so there wouldn't be any illumination. So that was.
Can I ask one other question also? When you got this and you look at it, I can almost tell, at least I do my own triage when this comes in. Did it have any of the triage markings that you normally would see, which would indicate, I always say my 5150 hurdle, the single space, the run-ons, the things like this? What was the character of it without giving it away?
Oh, I'll talk about that. Let me just finish up on these two items. So I didn't know, whether the placement was correct. And at the time, nobody knew about the floodlight. So I called the sheriff's department immediately, gave them the letter. And then a couple hours later, the FBI called. And I thought, well, the FBI is calling for a reason, because I figured if those items were not legit, the ones that were mentioned, the FBI wouldn't even bother with it. But they did. They called and they asked a ton of questions and wanted to find out about the origin of this email, which we can't tell them. And I don't think they've figured it out either. But as for whether this is a crazy person who wrote it, yes, we get tons of crazy people writing these. This is exactly the opposite. This is a well-constructed, structured, layered letter that has a beginning, middle, and end. It is grammatically all correct. Spelling is correct. It's not AI. You can tell whoever wrote this didn't throw it together in 5 minutes. And it is, I think, written by an intelligent and probably well-educated person. That's the way it reads to me. So it's the exact opposite of that, which put my antenna up even higher.
Right.
Now, the other thing that, look, I want to get into.
Does the letter itself make a ransom demand? And if so, what kind of currency?
Well, they're asking for it in Bitcoin, and
Correct.
they gave a Bitcoin address, and it's a legit address. The problem with Bitcoin is you just cannot find out who it's going to. And so,
well, they've got, that's where I push back a little bit, because I know from actually two cases I have right now that they don't want you to know this, but the government now has ways. They've got a front row seat, for lack of a better term. They've told me it's like watching a marathon. They can watch it go as it goes down the chain, so to speak, and they can generally follow it to a wallet.
Well, see, the first part of that I believe to be true, and that's what I've heard as well, that they can follow the chain. What I'm told is they still can't determine who it's going to. But maybe you're right. I don't.
Yeah, they say that. I based on what I've seen in government discovery, I'm not buying that at all. I think they now know, and I think they've got access to digital wallets and things of that nature. I think they can trace all that. It reminds me of when they went and got Maduro. Nobody had ever heard of that kind of eardrum disabling kind of weapons that we have. I can tell you from discovery in other cases that they have a sophisticated ability to track this stuff. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons that blockchain technology and all of that is actually being embraced.
If you're right, then it makes even a better case for the Guthrie family to pay the money even without proof of life if indeed the feds could track it down, arrest the person, and recover the money, if you're right.
Well, that's why I look. I've had this situation not often, but a couple of times. And, normally it is in a ransomware kind of a situation or cyber warfare, things of that nature. But in this case, I would be surprised if they weren't engaged in some way, shape, or form. I think that's also why the FBI was so curious and questioning you and trying to figure it all out.